Thank you everyone for joining us for this town hall to learn more about and discuss and answer questions about the Unified Development Ordinance, part of the Garner Forward Unified Development Ordinance update that the town is undergoing. My name is Jay McLeod and I work for Stewart. I'm a planning manager, and Stewart is a Raleigh firm, and we specialize in our group, the municipal planning group, works with local governments around the state to work on Unified Development Ordinance updates, comprehensive plans, and land use planning. There are also branches of the Stewart firm that are landscape architecture, structural engineering, geomatics, surveying, geotechnical inspections, and civil engineering. But our group works on planning, and so we deal with Unified Development Ordinance updates. And we've been hired by the town to help facilitate that process over the next year and a half, 2 years. With me today are Allison Evans and Caroline Richardson. They're also with the Municipal Planning Group. And we're working here under the guidance of Planning Director Jeff Triesenberg on this Unified Development Ordinance update. And so thank you all for joining us today. I know these are interesting times, and it's great to have you along and participating. We hope to explain about the process of the update and what's going to happen and when and how. And at the end, we'll be taking questions that are submitted through the chat window. So if you have any questions throughout, please just submit them into the chat window, and we'll make sure we answer those and get back to them at the end of the presentation. And then also, you can check the project website, and all you have to do is really type Garner UDO rewrite or Unified Development Ordinance rewrite into your Google browser searcher, and it'll take you right there. So thank you.
First, let's talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. It is first helpful to discuss what a UDO is and isn't before we dive into all the nuts and bolts. A Unified Development Ordinance defines the standards and process for local land use and development regulation. It contains standards for development that touch on everything from how land is subdivided to landscaping requirements to street layout. It is often confused with a comprehensive plan, which is a more aspirational, visionary document that contains the vision for the town. A UDO contains the regulations that create the environment imagined in that comprehensive plan. It is a good time to update Garner's UDO because Garner recently passed a new comprehensive plan. It also has passed a transportation plan and a parks plan. The state has also recently passed legislation regarding planning statutes in North Carolina called Chapter 160D, and we will need to bring Garner's code into compliance with that legislation. Finally, Garner's UDO was last updated in 2003. It has undergone little patches and updates since then, but it's due for a full renovation.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the update process. The basic framework for the update is that we take our existing UDO, which is being used daily in the town of Garner to regulate land use and development applications and proposals. And then we're going to work it through a series of standard updates and input and advisory groups. So we're going to bring it up to the standards with a newly aligned Chapter 160D state zoning enabling statutes. We're going to bring in recommendations from adopted town plans like the comprehensive plan, the transportation plan, the Parks and Rec master plan, bike ped plan. There are a number of adopted plans that the town has that have recommendations on how to make the town a better place. So we're going to be bringing those forward into the UDO. We're also making sure that any regulations the town puts into place are consistent with federal case law. We're making sure we touch base with town and technical staff from other agencies like the City of Raleigh Public Utility Division to make sure that there's coordination between those agencies when they're helping developers and citizens and business owners own and operate and build investments in the town. All that information is going to be reviewed and absorbed by the steering committee, who has been appointed by the council. It's a number of volunteers that are residents and active members of the community. They're volunteering their time to help review that information, provide guidance on purpose and input, and kind of temper any proposed changes with local perspective. There's also a public input and review process, and this is kind of the first major broad public kickoff, but there are going to be other opportunities for public input along the way, both more broadly and more specifically. Basically, the desire is to not only bring the public input and the direction that was gathered in the comprehensive plan update from 2018, but also to bring in public input now on this process as it moves along and make sure that that gets incorporated and is addressed to the extent that people want to be involved. And in addition, like any text amendment to the ordinances of the town, this is also going to go through review and recommendation by the planning board and ultimately an adoption hearing with the town council. We anticipate that sometime in September, October maybe of next year, to be determined exactly based on hearing and adoption schedules. But basically we start with an existing UDO, we move through this update process and this framework, and then we get to a new UDO, which then goes to planning board and council in a public meeting and a public hearing for adoption. As far as the actual work on the document itself, the UDO is comprised of several articles, which are basically just subject-related sections in the UDO. Each one of those articles is going to be reviewed by Stuart, my group, the consultant, to make sure that we bring forward all the desired changes that were identified in that framework we just discussed. Staff here at the town and Stuart will review those articles together. Right now we're grouping the articles together in something we call a module, so they're kind of in related bunches that can be kind of digested and reviewed together so that it's a pretty big document, so we don't want to overwhelm anyone. Trying to bring it in bite-sized chunks. That review kind of gets put together and brought to the steering committee for their review, and then they're going to provide guidance on the proposed changes. Periodically, those modules will be bundled together into a slightly larger group and taken to a joint planning commission, town council work session to get their input and guidance, and also to make sure that as we move along through this update process, everyone is being informed and kept on board and understanding the changes and providing guidance as necessary so that we get to the end. By the time we get to the end of this process, everyone knows how we got there and why we got there. Also, periodically, there will be public meetings like this one, although hopefully the next one will be in person and face-to-face. But certainly a virtual component will probably remain regardless, and so that this option will be always available. But at these public meetings, there will be a chance to gather more public input, answer questions. Also, the proposed UDO draft changes, draft articles will be posted online at the project website for public review and comment. Then the UDO modules will be revised again based on that collected comment. And then ultimately, the entire UDO draft proposed changes will be taken to the Planning Commission and the Town Council for their review and an adoption hearing. Now, who's involved in this process? The steering committee was as volunteers that are appointed by the Town Council. 3 of our steering committee members are in that picture there. I'm afraid I don't have a picture of the entire steering committee, but they represent the town, and they're part of this process to review the materials and the proposed changes and weigh perspectives and provide guidance on the purpose and implementation and magnitude of the changes that are proposed. And so that's the role of steering committee. And so far we've already had a steering committee meeting. It was very informative and kind of kicked off a lot of the same information about how the process is going to proceed and got their input also on some issues that they see as important to the community. Kind of in partnership with the steering committee is a group of technical advisory personnel. These are staff members and representatives of key outside agencies, like for instance the City of Raleigh Public Utility Division, NCDOT perhaps, and other outside agencies, Wake County. These are the people that are responsible, generally speaking, for interacting on a day-to-day basis and using the Unified Development Ordinance for review, communication, and enforcement of land development applications and land use proposals. These people will advise on the operational details, administration, and procedures and coordination logistics. And the goal is to both coordinate standards across departments and agencies and also within the town so that the proposed changes are both understandable and enforceable and administratively achieved within the framework of the existing town structure. As far as the timeline for this project, right now we're working on a wrap-up date sometime, like I said, in fall of next year. But in between now and then, we're kind of in the beginning portion right here, and you see that little red star in the Q1 of 2020, quarter one, is our first public open house. There will be a public survey coming up soon to talk about development character preferences for the town. That's going to be online and advertised to the whole town. Then we're going to be working through the articles as modules in a series of iterative steps and working through that review process that I outlined earlier. And then ultimately, we're going to be taking it to Planning Commission and Council for adoption hearing later on. And you can kind of see here conceptually how the different articles will be grouped into modules that kind of share a similar subject matter. And now I'm going to pass it back to Allison to talk about the guidance from the currently adopted plans and how those will kind of be rolled into this UDO update.
So this all seems like a massive project, but lucky for us, we have guidance from the previous plan and that planning process to help us do this update. The public engagement from those processes, including comprehensive plan, has given us these 5 major guiding principles for our work and how Garner wants to be shaped in the future. They want to build on and conserve Garner's character, promote new housing options, expand recreation opportunities beyond play, attract non-residential uses that citizens need, and improve the efficiency of the transportation systems. There was also more specific feedback on development in Garner contained in these plans. These specific goals want to improve development outcomes with design-based regulation to improve the building standard in Garner. They want to preserve existing housing and encourage affordable housing options. They want to modernize and revise parking regulations, incentivize development in North Garner around the downtown area, and evaluate rules and regulations for street trees and tree preservation, as landscaping is very important to the Garner community. They also want to strengthen driveway spacing and access management rules to help with traffic congestion, promote and require transportation connectivity so people can get around town, adopt guidelines and rules for complete transportation corridors, which includes cars, bike, and pedestrians, and promote greenway construction to meet their goal of 33 new miles of greenway by 2030 in Garner. Now we will have Caroline guide us through that previously mentioned North Carolina Chapter 160D update.
Thank you, Allison. Chapter 160D is an update to state law regulating the planning powers of cities and counties in North Carolina. This delegation of power from the state to cities and counties allows for local zoning authority. This is North Carolina's most comprehensive legislative update for planning in 30 years. Garner has certainly changed, as has North Carolina during that time. So it's very important that Garner keep current with this new legislation. Luckily, Garner was already planning to update its UDO, so the 160D updates will flow simultaneously. Chapter 160D is organized into general and specific chapters, similar to the UDO. Some chapters include changes affecting the UDO more than others. For example, the jurisdiction chapter outlines the limits and physical bounds of planning authority for the cities and counties in North Carolina. The boards and organization chapter describes the advisory and decision-making bodies that the council or commission can establish. Processes once varied across jurisdictions, creating confusion and legal questions for municipalities around the state, but Chapter 160D includes an article definitively outlining processes. Luckily, Garner was already following most of these procedures. The zoning article specifies that local governments can regulate land use and development standards. There are some major impacts of 160D of which all local governments should be aware. There is a new comprehensive plan requirement. The comprehensive plan requirement is in effect as of July 1st, 2022. All localities exercising zoning authority must have adopted a comprehensive plan by that date. Garner already has a comprehensive plan that it adopted in 2018 that we mentioned, so that satisfies this requirement. Another significant change is that Chapter 160D allows the use explicitly of form-based codes. Form-based codes are an alternative to traditional zoning. They focus more on appearance and building materials rather than separation of land uses. Garner's new UDO will likely incorporate some of elements of form-based codes. This hybrid approach will help maintain community character, appearance, sense of place, while still preventing incompatible land uses like a single-family home and a big factory from locating near each other and experiencing conflicts or nuisances. Form-based codes will apply primarily in areas where there needs to be revitalization or redevelopment to incentivize positive growth. Now I'm going to turn it back over.
So I want to give a quick summary of some of the information that we've gathered during this UDO update process already, relating to some focus group interviews that we had with selected stakeholders representing business owners, citizens, neighborhood groups, elected and appointed board members, town staff and professionals, land use development professionals also across the area, utility providers like water, sewer, electric, and as well as a community tour that we, Stuart, conducted with town staff, where we drove around town and looked at and examined areas that are working, areas that need help, and then other areas that are anticipated to change significantly in the future. And we looked at what works, what's not working, and maybe what can be improved as part of kind of forming the information base for this, as part of this specific project, which is going to augment the information of the public input already gathered from the comprehensive planning process from 2 years ago. So one of the big things that we heard to start off with is that users of the UDO wanted a very user-friendly document with more predictable outcomes and a clear path to entitlement or land use permitting. They also wanted flexibility in achieving those standards set forth by the town so that there are many ways up the mountain, but everyone always gets to the top. There are also groups that are looking for higher standards in development, as long as that's balanced by the market realities. Certainly, growth in the triangle has changed a lot, and it's a much more competitive environment. But also there are ceilings that certain communities can get above if they can bring their development community along with them. And then there's also a need to make sure that we have consistency with other departments within the town and also other town ordinances so that everyone's paddling in the same direction. One of the big keys that was identified in one of the big projects, catalysts identified in the comprehensive plan, was the need to activate certain catalyst areas, possibly with higher density and intensity development allowances to kind of encourage redevelopment. Primarily these are located in the North Garner area. There also may be a need for some alternative design standards or custom character area standards for design in certain areas. And in particular, areas like downtown were identified as being character rich and unique to the town, having a sense of place that should be perpetuated, as well as the desire to ensure high quality recreation for residents, especially for active recreation, and that kind of ties in a little bit into the Parks and Rec plan with the greenways, Greenway plan, and other parks planning. As well as the opportunity to use amenity sites like the stormwater pond in that bottom right picture there, possibly making sure those are more usable by designing them and building them to be amenities to the neighborhood or the community, as opposed to just fenced off stormwater retention areas. And that's one of those opportunities right there where you can see the benefit to both residents and the development community to kind of merge those two ideas, as well as updates to signage to make sure that we're consistent with the town's vision for how development should look and how signage should look, as well as consistency with the federal statutes, recent federal case law regarding sign regulation in the United States. Tree preservation, landscaping, and perimeter buffers between incompatible uses were identified as important and maybe need a little bit of revision, as well as landscaping regulations, possibly simplifying and streamlining those, and looking at opportunities to incorporate street trees in certain character-rich districts. And when I say street trees, I'm talking about trees between the back of the curb and the sidewalk generally, or within the sidewalk. And a great example of street trees is right there in front of the new recreation center in downtown with the crepe myrtles and the tree grates right there along the parallel parking on Main Street. There's also an opportunity to consolidate and possibly update the transportation corridor overlays, and those are zoning districts that are established on the major thoroughfares like US 70, the interstate, Timber Drive. Revamping and updating the parking requirements for both on and off street parking, and then also looking at the standards for planned development districts. And you can kind of see some of the things from those pictures there that we're talking about is talking about when and where sidewalks and curb and gutter should be required on roads. At what point in time, what point in density of a development should we be looking at alley loaded versus on-street parking versus front-end parking, as well as landscaping requirements for those different districts. And Caroline is going to talk more now about upcoming public involvement and events.
So we didn't anticipate having public meetings virtually, but we adapted. So there will be other opportunities to participate in person. There are going to be public open house meetings at Town Hall. We'll have a few of those. There will also be Joint Planning Commission and Town Council updates. So Stuart will present to the council and the Planning Commission what has taken place for each module. Those are open to the public. There's also an online survey that will be released soon. And an online posting and review of UDO modules and articles. You're welcome to contact the planning staff here at Garner Town Hall, and you can visit the project website address here to learn more. Like Jay said, if you type in Garner UDO update, it should come up in your search engine.
So thanks everyone for joining us. That's the end of the formal presentation component. There will be, like Caroline said, opportunities for continuing public engagement and review and comment and sharing of perspectives and ideas and solutions. But right now we want to make sure we take some time to thank you all for your time this afternoon and joining us, and want to go ahead and answer any questions that we can that maybe have been typed into the chat window. And so I'm just going to leave up this page about the project website, and please check back there frequently for more information. There's summaries of all meeting documents and information gathered to date, and as new draft ordinances are proposed, they'll be posted there, as well as any updates to the schedule we have moving forward. So right now we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, hey Jay, this is Rick Mercer, Communications Manager for the town, speaking off camera. I'll be monitoring and curating any of the questions we get. So we have one so far. It reads, I noticed that chopping down mature trees in the redevelopment process and replacing them with a 10% sapling replanting does not provide nearly 10% tree coverage for decades. So the question is, have we considered what some other municipalities are doing to preserve reasonable amounts of tree cover?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly the concept of landscaping and tree preservation has already come up in some of the stakeholder interviews. You probably saw that landscaping regulations and perimeter buffers were mentioned in the stakeholder interviews and community tour. I appreciate that you're jumping right into the weeds, because that's the kind of person I am too. Want to get right down to business. So you're right. There's going to be a balance probably between encouraging redevelopment and infill development in higher density areas with landscaping regulations. You cannot have simultaneously a very dense tree canopy cover and a character-rich urban environment. Now, that doesn't mean that that solution works everywhere. And so, in fact, what we'll probably be looking at, if I had to guess right here standing without having run this by staff or the steering committee, is that we'll probably be looking at a tiered system of landscaping requirements that kind of custom tailors landscaping requirements to certain districts. Some more urban, some more suburban, and maybe some more rural. That being said, looking at the benefits of tree canopy preservation and thinking about the costs and balancing that with the gains are very important. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific about percentages, but at this point in time, we'll just make sure that we keep your perspective in mind as we move forward.
Great, thank you. Thank you for providing all the information and answers that you can. There is another question from Mr. David Watson. Will all meeting minutes be available online?
There are meeting summaries for the stakeholder interviews, which were the focus groups. There's meeting summaries for the community tour, and there are meeting summaries for the steering committee that are going to be online. And right now I'm referencing the steering committee, but it's also the technical advisory committee that's part of that. As well as any planning commission and planning commission and council meetings are also public meetings, so they'll have minutes posted as well. Oh, also summaries for the public meetings as well. Okay.
There was another question, I'm told indirectly, although I don't see it, but it apparently involved affordable housing. Maybe you could you talk broadly or in any sort of detail about how affordable housing might figure into this, how that might be considered as part of the update of the UDO?
Absolutely. So affordable housing was brought up in both the stakeholder interviews as well as the first steering committee meeting as a topic that's important not only to the community, but also I think we all are recognizing now across the nation that it's important nationally, regionally, state, local, at every level of existence in this nation. So affordable housing is definitely something that's important. After that first steering committee meeting, our group put together a little bit of an informational blurb, some informational resources that went out to the steering committee so that they can make themselves more knowledgeable. And we're investigating what affordability looks like in Garner and how it can be brought forward into the Unified Development Ordinance, and what role the Unified Development Ordinance can even play in bringing that forward.
Great. We have another question from Damian Dellinger, who happens to be a council member. His question is, how will the future development of I-540 be accounted for in the UDO rewrite scope?
That's a good question. Well, fortunately, we already have an interstate within our jurisdiction, and there is already a transportation corridor overlay associated with it. So we have some precedent and guidance and some history to see how those regulations have worked in this particular community and how those have impacted us. Certainly, there's a lot of interest and excitement about I-540, and it's going to, really change this side of Raleigh, I would say. I think everyone would agree. And so we have that kind of background information, and then as we move forward, we can kind of custom tailor recommendations based on the experiences that have happened here, as well as the guidance in the comprehensive plan and transportation plan documents.
Okay. Thank you. Again, good comprehensive answer. I do not see additional questions at this point. There was the affordable housing question, and I think you kind of addressed how that might figure into it. I guess we can hang out for maybe a few more minutes and see if anyone else wants to offer a question or comment. But for now, we'll hang out. And
Okay.
and please, there is time, folks, if you want to submit a question, and there will be time later, well into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely more information at the project website if you want to check that out. There's also links to the adopted town plans and the recommendations in those plans on the town website. Encourage anyone to submit questions that they have either now or if you think of something, a minute after you hang up, which is something I always do. Feel free to go ahead and email those to the planning department, and we'll make sure that we bring that information forward. And otherwise, I think we'll just probably take 5-10 minutes and make sure we are here to answer any questions.
I can read it to you, and if there's anything else you want to add, maybe, do you want to?
I mean, I think I pretty much covered it, but
Yeah.
why don't we just listen again and make sure?
Yeah. So yeah, the affordable housing, there's a new question. We'll come back to affordable housing because I found that part of the thread. So again, a K Descartes asks, can you speak to the focus on education that is mentioned? I'm not sure if that this person means our public education and outreach or
Right. So
another aspect.
I don't think that question sounds like it's about schools education, but the information and outreach for this project is primarily being conducted by the town through their existing social media and informational and sunshine lists and other outreach. Our function at Stewart is to make sure that we are facilitating the UDO update process and providing the town with any information that they need to move this project forward and to provide information to the public about the process and about the products developed during this update. The information that was distributed to the steering committee about affordable housing is certainly available for anyone who's interested. We can make that available, absolutely. If that's what the question is about.
I suppose if this viewer wants further clarification, they can add that. I'm going to come back to what the same person wrote with regard to affordable housing. I don't know if there's anything else that you need to add, but it will at least kind of pose it to you in the way that they wrote it. I noticed that the plan is to encourage affordable housing while most other municipalities are planning for affordable housing. Encouraging isn't concrete enough to ensure there will be an impact. Keeping Garner's character means we need to ensure affordable housing. The person then writes, programs like Raleigh Area Land Trust have plans that create long-term affordability of current housing to enable educators and public service workers that they can also live in our community. What will we do to make affordability happen? I think you touched on some things. Is there anything else you think to add about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I addressed a lot of that, but I'll just go on a little bit more to say that, affordable housing, or some people say workforce housing, housing for firefighters and police officers and teachers and nurses and, all this it's very important. A UDO is a tool for regulating land use and development. It's not necessarily, there are certainly things in a UDO that affect affordability, but it's not the only force. It's not the market. It's not the cost of land. It certainly has some effect on the cost of land, but it's not wages. You can't regulate wages in a UDO. So there's certainly a component that the UDO can play. And understanding Garner's position, both regionally and locally in affordable housing, and its relative to other municipalities is important to determine the depth to which the town desires to address that issue through its UDO.
Great. And this comes back to the question of education. I think this person was asking about school education as was mentioned as a focus in the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, supporting public education in the community. Maybe this is not quite a UDO question, but more, I don't know, a bigger part of the comprehensive plan vision.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are certainly, a comprehensive plan addresses more than just a UDO. So a UDO is actually only a subset of the overall town ordinances that govern all things in the town, from garbage pickup to payroll policies to stray animal policies, or where you can play basketball or ride a bike on the street or the sidewalk or whatever. So traffic law. So The UDO only addresses a small portion of the activities of a town, and the comprehensive plan is meant to encompass all the activities of the town. As Allison mentioned previously, a comprehensive plan is an aspirational document in a lot of ways. It talks about the Garner that we want to be and how can we get there, and maybe ideas and goals and vision for moving in the direction of where we want to be and what we want to bring with us and what we maybe are okay with leaving behind. The UDO is the law of the land in terms of development and land use. And so the UDO is meant more to be what are the minimums that need to be achieved to accomplish land use, a new land use or a new development or expanding a development in Garner. What are the bare minimums that are required? And so there's often a gap between the aspirational vision of a comprehensive plan and the requirements for minimum operation in the town of Garner. And there's certainly room for anyone to do better than the bare minimums. But this is the time often when communities will take a look at those aspirations and take a look at their current minimums and say, are we comfortable with where these are? Do we want to bring them up some? Or how is that going to go? And so that's that's the balancing act that the steering committee and the planning commission and the town council and the public play a role in this process. Is weighing those perspectives and those priorities and kind of making those trade-offs, because you can't get anything great unless you also give something up. And so oftentimes we have to make the decision is giving up something worth getting some other thing, and that's kind of the role of the public and these elected and appointed boards in this process.
And again, this is Rick Mercer, Communications Manager, speaking off camera, kind of looking at curating some of these questions that are coming into us. I feel like that was a pretty good clarification of sort of the aspirational part of a comp plan versus kind of what a UDO is designed to do.
I guess I should add, to be more specific to the question, is that the UDO can't necessarily regulate school boards or school districts. That's probably the more direct answer.
Yeah. I'm not seeing other stuff come in right now. If the public, we'll give it maybe 2 more minutes, let's say, and if there are any more viewers out there who have comments or questions they want to pose now, and again, later you can find the UDO rewrite page on the garnernc.gov website under planning. You can reach out to planning staff with specific questions, and there will be, as you've said, other public events and updates to town council throughout this process.
Yeah. This is the very beginning of the UDO rewrite process. It's if you want to think of it as like a kickoff informational public town hall meeting, that's where we're at, and there's going to be a lot more opportunities moving forward for pretty much everyone to be as involved as they want to be as we move through this technical rewrite. So.
And I think with that, Jay and Carolyn Allison, thank you all. And I guess we'll wrap it up at this point. Let me take a quick scan. I don't see anything else coming in. But
okay. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for tuning in, and I hope to meet you in person in the future. And have a great Wednesday. Thanks.